Hello everybody, welcome to Belmont Reviews, where I am reviewing the game that I said I wasn't going to purchase until I found out it was a good game. That game is Resident Evil 7. Now, I came into this game extremely skeptical, given Resident Evil's past history with Umbrella Corps, Resident Evil 7, and yeah. So I came in waiting to get aggravated at it. But I was delightfully surprised. Resident Evil is back in its original form. The claustrophobic atmosphere is wonderful as you explore the Baker house. But there is a few criticisms that I'll get to later on. Right now, let's just talk about the environment. The environment you're in and the mentality that you have. This part actually kind of did not make sense to me. You play as Ethan, and your wife, who has been suspected dead for 3 years, calls you or sends you a video message telling you not to go to where she is, but here's where it is. Don't go there. That doesn't really make sense to me. And to me, that really tells me that Ethan was just pretty much flat out obsessed with her. So he goes there despite what I would have done, and I would have said, you know what, it's been 3 years. It's been 3 years, something happened, I don't know what, and I don't know who or what really sent this message. So, no. I wouldn't go, but Ethan's the character you play, so yeah, you go along with it, obviously, from what you see. And what I really liked about it is that the scares are drawn out in sequences for the most part. And at first the house looks kind of normal, just abandoned and decrepit, and then later on in the game you start seeing this black slime, mutated dolls, animal parts. But by the time that happens, you already know you're in a bad situation. It's nice that it clarifies it a little bit. But the game is a massive amount of decaying spaces littered with rotting memories of a previous life that you had, in the previous life that the Bakers had, I should say. And it just lets you know that something's not right. And it makes you wonder, how did this happen to them? And the puzzles are back, which was part of the very first Resident Evil game, which I enjoyed. Granted, I found the puzzles will be a little bit easy, but you're also talking to an older gamer who's had to deal with cryptic nonsense in video games. So you just wind up getting the sixth sense about things and how to solve the puzzles easily. The game itself is at a low-key, slow burn with its minimal cast, single location, and that creep generally builds and builds and builds like a great original horror movie. And when I mean a great original horror movie, I'm not talking about the next blood-soaked thriller with a multi-million-dollar budget. I'm talking about the low-budget ones that are actually good. That's how you develop the script. A lot of horror movie people that want to make a horror movie should look at this game as kind of like a good writer's pace on how to pace the game out. And it is a little confusing every now and then. It kind of leaves your head spinning because in the back of your head you're always thinking, what happened? But you don't really have too much time to really worry about that at that point. That's when things start going out like crazy. Now, there is a lot of nods to a lot of horror movies in this, including the obvious Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even Blair Witch, and Japanese horror movies. And when you're at the dinner scene in particular, that reminds me a lot about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with the grandmother just kind of sitting there. That's the largest amount of people you're going to see on screen at the same time. That's it. That minimal cast works very well. Okay, now let's talk about the boss battles. But right off the bat, as you can see here, I'm not going to be displaying the boss battles or anything that could be confused as spoilers. I do this because I want you to actually, if you haven't got the game already, to go out and buy the game and see it for yourself. Go out there and witness it firsthand. I just don't, one thing that a lot of video game developers do get agitated about when it comes to YouTube reviewers are possibly spoiling some of the games, telling the ending, showing the boss battles and things like that. They do, and I can't say it's a legitimate gripe because they cannot prove that it directly hurts their sales, but it is a gripe nonetheless. And at the end of the day, all reviewers need to understand that when it comes to the Fair Use Act, you can't hide under it all the time, because fair use implies that it was made in the US. If some parts of it were made outside the US, the fair use law may not apply to it. There are some countries where you can't even release any criticisms about something without permission. So that's why I do it in this particular format. It's not that I only play 15 minutes and then say, okay, done. I don't do that, because especially with Resident Evil, because you are robbing yourself if you do that. But the boss battles, some are great. Others are just so mind-numbing that it's just mind-numbing, confusing, aggravating, and there's not a whole lot of them, which you should not expect a lot of boss battles here, mainly due to the fact that it's a small cast. So I really do wish that it was more, like a different sequence, maybe add some cousins to the Baker family. But as it is right now, especially with the DLC, that's when it gets good. You can play all the DLC, you play the whole package itself. It is a terrific game. Although there is one part about it that really, really gets on my nerves, and that is the amount of Outlast type situations. A lot of it reminded me of PT and Outlast. And I'm not going to discredit Resident Evil for that. I think it's because mainly if you play a lot of horror games, you get used to it, you see the trends, and you wind up picking up on them very quickly. So that I'm going to blame myself on for playing so many horror games. Maybe I should just kind of branch off into some other kind of games for a while. Give the horror game a break. Now, when it comes to the latter part of the game. The latter part of the game, that is where I really got annoyed with. That was bothersome. I mean, it left a lot of wait, what? Type moments. And again, I'm not going to show any part of it because I want you to go down there and I want you to actually play the game yourself. But essentially, if you pick the right ending, then it kind of ties up Ethan's story in a nice little bow. Kind of. Like all games lately, there is a chance for it, it leaves the door open for a sequel. Personally, I would have liked that door to be closed, because it does stand on its own two legs as a standalone game. I hope this isn't a precursor to 15,000 yearly sequels, because that's what hurt the original Resident Evil in the first place. Was just these monumental amounts of sequels, and eventually you run out of ideas, and then you get Umbrella Corps. Then you get Resident Evil 6. Then you get Operation Raccoon City. That's what happens when you run out of ideas. Close the door on that story, complete closure, and give your writers a time to think about it. Give them a different project or something to refresh their mind, so that they don't get so strung out that it becomes very difficult to come out with a good sequel. Overall, I will give this game, I give it a solid 8 out of 10. I mean, the latter part was just really what dropped it down for me. As well as one other aspect we got to talk about is the VR experience. Now, as with every VR experience that's been made so far, there's some people that are just immune to motion sickness. That, like, it's just never going to happen to them. But that's a very small percentage of the people out there. There's some people that may get sick after playing for just a few minutes, and let alone if you suffer the effects of vertigo. The whole VR thing, to me, I don't see it as lasting too long. Because anybody that remembers the Virtual Boy, anybody that remembers that thing can tell you that this type of technology, it's above what most people can handle. It's great for smaller games, but for Resident Evil, it's too long for this, where you would have to take a break every 10 to 20 minutes or so to just kind of reorientate your balance. So, not to mention, it's also kind of funny. One thing to do with the VR, when you're playing Resident Evil with the VR, try looking at your arms. That gets pretty hilarious. So, with my scoring, the VR experience, I give it the same score. It's pretty much the same thing. It just makes you a little nauseous every now and then where you have to take a break. But that's with all VR games, so I'm not going to get on the game for that. This will probably be my last review for a little bit. Mainly just to give my wallet a break. A lot of people think, oh, as soon as you put a video on YouTube, you get millions of dollars. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that at all. So, to give my wallet a little bit of a break, at least until May 16th. May 16th, one of my favorite game franchises is coming out with part 2, and that is the Injustice set. That one I will be very adamant about. I will get as much of it into it as I possibly can. But until then, I'm going to hold off a little bit on the reviews. But I am going to do a lot more gaming history videos, where it talks about the history, but there's only certain games I can talk about. Like, say with the what I wanted to do with Mega Man X Part 3, I wanted to do a talk about that. To talk about that particular game's history. I was not really allowed to. Certain things just kind of said no. So I'm going to go back and just stick to the absolute classic games. From the Ataris. Yeah, from the Atari set of games. Mainly just due to the fact that these games actually have a pretty interesting history. Especially knowing that the coders of a lot of the Atari 2600 games knew they couldn't be fired. So they kind of went around and did whatever little zany thing that they did. And I think that's something that people should, I think that's something that might entertain everybody. It also gives a more in-depth history about the particular games that are the grandfathers of the games that we play today. If it wasn't for these classics, we wouldn't have the modern day awesomeness. So that's what I'm going to be covering up until for a while. Unless a game comes out of the blue and really knocks my socks off, I'm just going to give my wallet a little break. Alright, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to click that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you very much. Bye bye.